Welcome to this episode of Ambitious Broker, and with me today is a longtime friend of mine and a super professional real estate broker, Shawn Halahmy. So, Shawn, welcome to Ambitious Broker, and thanks for being with me.
Thank you for having me on this. Yeah. Appreciate it.
Let's jump right in. I know that you're now 25 years. What's
in
your
the
time?
business?
Yeah.
Oh, longer than that.
Longer than that.
Over 30 now.
Over 30.
Yeah,
that's what I say.
I started in 1990. Actually.
1990. Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. So it's been a long time. That's interesting, of course, because I don't think people realize, particularly consumers realize that about 50% of everybody in real estate today is still less than 5 years in the business.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And when I do tell people how long I've been in, they're blown away. And it's even becoming more rare to find other agents that are in the business that long.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, you think about, when I think about this, and I think about it's just an observer of the industry now, I guess you'd say, and someone who studies it, the fact that 1 out of every 2 agents out there literally only have the last 5 years perspective.
Right.
Add to that most are only doing 1 or 2 transactions a year.
Yeah.
So you're talking about half the industry is involved with less than probably 10 escrows or 10 transactions over the course of their entire year.
Yeah.
And I think clients forget about that.
Yeah, it's really interesting because there's so much to a transaction these days that has changed that really, if you don't have someone who has their hands in it all the time, it's amazing that.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a more complex transaction, more variables, more paperwork, with less training.
Way more paperwork, yeah.
In the industry.
Completely, yes.
Yeah. So, and there's no way that a consumer could possibly know that. We know it in the industry, and that's part of why I've respected you for so long, is that you always try to take the high road on stuff and you study it and you speak from some knowledge about what's going on. So I know in your case, you've got hundreds of these experiences. And let's take a second, talk about what you think those 100 transactions or more, it's more than that, I'm sure.
Hundreds, yeah.
Yeah, hundreds, has led you to do differently than, say, the average guy out there who's got those 5 or 10 transactions under his belt.
Right. Well, I'll go back a little bit. I was fortunate enough to land a starting in real estate, land at a place that really emphasized education and teaching.
Right.
And so, ironically, sitting here talking to you, it was a company that you owned way back when.
Right.
And when I got my license, I went and interviewed several offices, and yours was the only one that had any substantial training program. It was 4 weeks. It was Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And so I was young, and to me, it was an easy commitment to make. In retrospect, years later, I realized how there's no training that really happens with agents. And I realized that, I don't know if you guys did it on purpose, consciously, or it was a byproduct, but in order to commit to 4 weeks, not being paid, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, that means that you didn't really have another job or another commitment that you have to do in order to make that commitment to the training program.
Right.
So that created your office in your company a situation where any new agents were going to be well taught, well trained. And that's what happened at that company years ago.
Yeah, I think at that time, the best training program that we were aware of for someone brand new, this might surprise some people, the members of the public, but the best training program then was a 3-week program. And I made a commitment that I would never hire a new salesperson until I could prepare them better than anyone else in the industry.
Right, and I remember that. I remember that you guys said that. And so that's why your training program, I still remember things that we were taught back then that are so basic, so fundamental, that agents today have no idea about those things.
Right.
So right there, I had an edge just coming out of the gate. And then I have an inquisitive personality. I like to figure it out. And I also have this kind of perfectionism to me. So I want to make sure that things go right. So what does that mean? That means inquiring more. That means asking questions more. That means being present more. And that has led me to understand all the kind of the ancillary things around real estate, whether it's insurance or inspections or title and all of that other stuff, how it really works,
right,
and what makes it all tick.
Yeah, that's one of the things I've noticed about you in your transactions is that, to your point, you can talk about the construction of the roof. You can talk about the air conditioning and all the details and the sewage and all those last details about the house. You sense and you smell problems that others may not see because of that.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but yes, I do believe that has given me an edge to help my clients, both buyers and sellers.
Right.
I can anticipate things. It's become sort of like a sixth sense. Now, yeah, also someone who's been doing it for a long time should develop that.
Right.
Yet I run into new and agents that have been around for a long time who they simply don't know. I ask them, did you order this? Did you have that? And no, they've had the listing for a month, let's say, it didn't sell. And they still don't have basic information.
Right.
Let me call the seller. Let me find out and this and that. And to me, that's just mind blowing.
Well, you started to allude to it a second ago, and that is that I just felt like if someone was going to come in the business and we were going to let them represent us, that they have to know what they're doing. And even after that 4-week training program, which by the way was 33.33% more than anybody else in the business at the time.
Way more,
and it could have been more probably if you want to really, really get prepared. We had some follow-up, training and so forth. But the thing that was interesting about it is that a huge percentage of those people have gone on to become very successful.
I would think so, yes.
And then when we analyzed that, years passed, because it wasn't, you said something about this, but it wasn't the original intent of doing it. We were just trying to put together good content and have enough, curriculum that covered enough that we felt a client was pretty well protected. So, but in retrospect, it's true that we believe today is that when the person had to make a commitment to 4 weeks, when they could go to any real estate company on the planet and start tomorrow, that there was something innate in that person that says, I'm just a character, I'm just the kind of person that feels like I need to know what I'm doing.
Yeah, and you know what? I was blown away by that. There were a couple offices, we'll give you a desk and you ask questions, and I'm 23 years old at that time, and I don't know, I knew I didn't know anything.
Right.
I'm like, really? I'm going to help people buy and sell a house? And there's just go?
Yes.
I found that to me very poor
agree.
judgment, and so that's how we met, and that's how it all started. And when the broker and trust concept came along, I was very discouraged with real estate. This was around the 2010, 11, 12 time period,
right? And
what had happened with the big companies and how they were all about the numbers, and it was no longer a client-centric industry. It became an agent-centric industry.
That's right.
And what that meant was the main offices, the owners, the brokers, the philosophy became more agents, more deals. Even if we have 100 agents that do 30 deals collectively, that's 30 more deals than we didn't have. Right. So let's do it. And the risk, fine. There's insurance. You deal with it. It doesn't matter. But what that happened is it diluted the quality of the experience for the consumer.
Right.
And that frustrated me beyond all. And I was surrounded. I looked around one day and I'm thinking to myself, wow, there's so many agents around this office that and I was no longer at your office. You had moved on to other things. Right. But there was no longer a quality source of people. And it really just frustrated me.
And they might be good people. They just weren't good agents.
Yeah, They're most real estate agents, I think, are good-hearted. They mean well.
Right.
They really want to help their clients. They just don't have the tools.
Right.
And there are some that do and just don't care enough to do it. But that's when I poked my head up and said, I'm just not. I was really thinking, I'm really not happy doing this any longer. I don't like to do it this way.
Well, we had that. I remember we talked about it, and you felt that those people brought you down because you had a commitment level equivalent to an accountant or an attorney or something like that to your business. Yeah. And these people had the commitment level of a barista at Starbucks or something.
And some of them were.
And some of them probably were, yeah.
But no, seriously, it was very frustrating, and it was just I didn't like real estate anymore as much. I wanted to continue doing it, but not in that frame.
Right.
So when Broker and Trust came along, I learned about that and gave it some thought. I said, you know what? I really need to get my broker's license and see where this takes me.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's been the best thing I've probably done. So it's now almost 10 years.
Right.
And
but you've really jumped on the fact that the people who carry the same name as you live by the similar standards as you.
Yeah, we have to.
And that you don't have that low end. There's nobody at your company that or in your organization that is 5 years in the business.
Correct. Or
the
less.
average is 20-some years or something like that.
Yeah.
And so you're in that, and it compounds its benefits because I know that now when you have conversations with people in your group, your organization, everyone knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, and
as opposed to walking into an office where 2/3 of the people are brand new in the business and don't know it. Yeah.
Right, and we can call each other, which we do, and I mean, we all have been in the business for a long time and we know a lot, but we certainly don't know everything.
Right.
And if I need a resource or a referral or a weird question, I can text, reach out, call any number of 5-10 people.
Yep.
And just within,
you got 1,000 years of experience at your fingertips.
Basically.
Well, let's see how that shaped you or you are shaping your Broker and Trust group. But because you got in, and that was the thing, when you made the decision, I'm going to go spend 4 weeks, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it was a lot considering that you still have a life, you still have bills to pay, you can't work.
Sure.
And so it's a commitment to say, this business means that much to me. And I've really learned to respect that from people because it's said inside of you that I'm going to take this serious. I'm going to make it my career. I need to know what the heck I'm talking about. And that's just the beginning.
Of course.
Okay. Then your natural instincts kind of have taken it from there.
Yeah,
that's true. Let's talk about how that has evolved into service. So I mentioned earlier that I know you know a lot of detail about concrete, foundations, roofs, air conditioning, sewage systems, and stuff like that. And you see things at drainage, and things like that other agents won't see. But it's one of those things that a client doesn't always understand, that if you can spot, and I know you have, a potential problem with drainage, or you see something in a roof that looks questionable and you can steer them away from it or negotiate some settlement over that in a transaction, I mean, that's very valuable stuff to someone.
Sure. And at the bare minimum, let's say a buyer wants to buy a house. They want that house.
Right.
And you've made them aware of a bunch of stuff. And they either decided to inspect it or they did and they still bought the house. There was a fault of some sort. But the main foundation of it all is you made your client aware.
Right.
So that in 3 months, in 6 months, when you call and say hello, you're not afraid to call and say hello. You're confident in the transaction. And, the tree, we talked about getting an arborist and you decided not to.
Right.
But at least we had the conversation.
Right.
So now whatever the issue with the tree is, you knew you had a chance to deal with it. You bought the house anyhow, so It doesn't matter.
Right.
And sometimes you discover things for a buyer and you are able to negotiate a better price, get a credit. At the minimum, it's just knowledge. They know.
And you also represent sellers who will have a buyer come in and start asking for things that are ridiculous.
Oh yeah, I had a seller. It was $1.5 million house or something like that, and the buyer came in and they did 8 inspections, everything foundation. It was a hill, so we allowed them to dig a pit and see for themselves that the bracing was done properly and everything was done great. But there were other issues. There was a leaning wall in the backyard, and you could see the wall was leaning.
Right.
Etc. So they came at us with an approximately $80,000 request of repairs.
Right.
And we said, no, you did your investigations. There are some things that are an issue, but we don't believe that other buyers are going to ask for that, and we're not going to give you $80,000. The request went down lower, but honestly, they ended up getting about $3,500. The buyer did.
Right.
And I don't know. I think that if you didn't have knowledge and experience representing the seller that way, the seller may have caved and had to pay more or lost the buyer, which means losing time, having to find a new buyer. Time is money, and you didn't want to do that. So we kept the deal together, 30-day escrow, and everybody moved along. The buyer didn't have to buy it.
Let's dissect that for a second, because that's basically, I know that there are agents, those 5-year agents, or a better way to put it is probably those people that have done less than 20 or 30 transactions, who they just don't have the instinct for understanding that the buyer's trying to pull one over on you, or it's an unreasonable request, or it isn't really that big a problem that you're talking about.
Right.
And they would have encouraged someone to negotiate that, pay the $80,000
or more, or not
or
80,
$60,000 or $50,000. But the point is,
but even if they paid 20, 20 is still way more than $3,500.
Yeah.
So you just have to be aware.
But see, that's the way good agents like yourself end up making people money, because like you said, your ability to navigate those waters saves someone $20,000-$30,000.
Absolutely. And with the seller, it's also upfront work. You walk into a house and you can sell it completely as is, absolutely, without any modifications or anything that you might want to do to it or think. But you could also have a conversation with the seller and say, look, let's get quotes for doing things. We'll get line items. See if it makes sense to paint this room or part of it or all of it. See if it makes sense to do this and that. If we get a quote, and let's say the quote comes with $20,000 to do all these things, and then you do comps to the house, you analyze the comparables, and you say, look, homes that in your neighborhood, this area, that were basically as is, you can tell from the photos. I've talked to the agents many times. I've seen the houses myself, and they didn't really do much. This is what they sold for. But look, if they just spruced it up a bit and they did these few things, paint, flooring, etc., they might get $100,000 more or more. And so you've changed the property from sort of this tired that maybe a flipper investor would buy, to make it more homey, and proper staging and all that a buyer then, an actual end user buyer, buys it, isn't overwhelmed because you've done $20,000 worth of stuff, and they'll pay $100,000 or more. Yeah. So by that philosophy, if you analyze it that way with your seller, you can make them money just like that.
Right.
So it's very important.
Yeah, the experience is, and it's unfortunate that a seller and a buyer will typically do a transaction every 15 years or something.
Yeah.
So they aren't doing a lot of transactions. You take someone in their third house, they've covered 50 years of their life probably. So it's a grossly underestimated service if someone does it well.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm having you here today, is because you do it well, and you do. So let's talk about some of the details. Example, if you're working with a buyer today, what's that service look like to you? I mean, you meet with them to begin with, or what do you start talking about?
Well, of course, it just depends on the level of the buyer. Mm-hmm. If they're first time or not buyer, they sometimes have some knowledge. But you start with, for me, it's before you go shopping for anything, you got to figure out your budget.
Right.
So that's number one. So you got to figure out the budget, get with a lender that you know and trust to qualify them and to make them as strong of a buyer as they can be.
Right.
So that's the first thing. Then the education process continues.
I'm sorry to step on you. Yeah. What's your philosophy in terms of lenders? Do you recommend them lenders? Do you recommend they go to their own lender? Do you have one or two lenders that are right and you try to get them to use them?
Yeah, I have a couple lenders that I trust, and the reason that I do recommend them, and even if someone absolutely insists on using a lender that they know, a family or something, I still would love for them to speak with someone I know. And there are a couple of reasons for that. It's not so much that people think, oh, well, you don't trust that lender. The actual reason for that is very different. When there are multiple offers, and many times there are, and you try to give your buyer the edge to get the house.
Right.
One of the things that helps with the listing agent, because the seller and the listing agent want one thing, assurance. Certainty. They want to know that that deal will close.
Right.
And so if I can stack the cards better for my client, they may get the house. And by saying to the listing agent, hey, look, I know the lender. I've done loans with this lender. They're great. He or she has performed. I would get a loan through them. My family would get a loan through them. We have. And so that gives more peace of mind to that agent and seller that this buyer is a good buyer.
Right.
As opposed to if they ask me, do you know who the lender is? And I say, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to say, no, I don't know. It's a lender that the buyer has a relationship with. That may not give them as much of an edge. And you know what? In the market we're in, representing buyers, every little bit helps. It's a game of inches. It's literally that crazy.
Right.
So, you try. Sometimes you can't beat cash offers, but sometimes you can.
And that's the thing. I mean, I know we see offers or properties that get sold, and there's multiple offers, sometimes 20 offers.
Oh, yeah.
But certainly 2, 3, 4 offers. We see a lot. And you see sellers that often take an offer that the price wasn't as high as one of the ones they turned down.
Absolutely. It's happened to me on both sides, representing sellers and representing buyers. I know I've had buyers get houses with not being the highest offer, the most down. They still got it.
Right.
And I actually have asked the listing agents, why did they go with us? And they said, your whole package, the way you submitted it, the way you presented it, and even though we don't present offers in person anymore like we did before computers and years ago, which was amazing to do, there's still a way to package it, to write the offer, to communicate properly that gives your client the edge. And that literally has gotten my clients, my buyers, houses. And on the other side, with a seller, it's the same thing. You analyze everything. And if you have a 95% loan, 5% down offer from a self-employed person with a company that they've owned for 2 years versus a 20%, 40% all cash offer, forget the cash because that's always going to win. But let's just say a simple 20% down, clean offer, W-2 wage earner that has excellent credit and no financial issues, whatever, and that offers a little less, 3%, 5%, 10,000, 30,000 less. I've seen sellers go for that.
Well, you've got 3 people to sit down making an offer. None of them are cash, so it means everyone needs a loan.
Right.
If you have the ability to smell out a problem buyer, and you can avoid that going into escrow, being in escrow for 30, 60 days, then falling out of escrow, and the seller has to put their house back on. That saves people money.
Yes.
Not to mention the aggravation.
Time, money, aggravation.
So it comes back to the word we just used before. And I pound it all the time. I want to know it's going to close. Certainty.
Yes.
Sell me certainty.
Yes.
If I'm going to go in as a buyer, it's probably the most powerful tool they can have is to say, when you and I sign this transaction off today, it's going to close.
Yeah.
For sure. Absolute certainty. And you give that kind of commitment to someone, and you can back it up with the paperwork.
I don't actually go that far and guarantee anything because anything can happen.
Of course.
But for sure, we say, look, these are the 5 offers. Of these, I believe after doing my research, talking to the lenders, talking to everybody, I believe this is the pecking order of which one is most likely to close and which one less, etc. And that's what my opinion is.
Right.
We've analyzed it. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, these are the numbers. You want the higher offer, we'll go with it. But at least we've had the conversation. Right. And if we go with a higher offer and it works for you, great. If it doesn't, well, then we go back to the drawing board.
Right. Right.
So that's...
All right, so let's go back to the start of this. And so you sit down with your buyer and you said, let's get this money thing worked out.
Yes.
So you want to sit down with some lender that you know or they know, but maybe have a couple lenders check. But
yes.
Again, you're saying to them, let's get you in a position where you look so strong that if you come against a multiple offer situation on a house that you love and do not want to lose, that we've got you positioned to look to be the strongest that you could possibly look.
Right.
That's the goal.
That's the goal.
Okay. So now you've done that. You've got people all aligned, and where are you going next? What's the next thing?
Well, actually, the next thing is I find the best education for a buyer is through touring the homes. So you start looking at some houses and you start pointing things out. And yeah, is there sometimes you walk into the first house or the fifth house and that's the house and they buy it and they're done? Absolutely. But that's rare.
Right.
Most of the time it's an ongoing education process and consulting with the client as to what they like. And look, frankly, the first time we go out with a buyer, I tell the buyer as well, this is just as much of a learning experience for me as it is for you. You're out kicking the tires, seeing what you might think you like or you don't want, or you can adjust your parameters. I'm here observing what makes you tick, what you like, what you don't like, so I could better help find a house for you, or point the right thing out for you. But at the same time, I point things out. I say, look here, look there. I say, look, we're going to have inspections. And I prep them and say, look, I'm going to advise on most houses to have these basic inspections. They're going to cost you probably about $1,000, $1,500. On some properties, I may advise you to have other inspections. You could hit up to $2,000 in inspections, and you need to know that.
Right.
Most properties that we deal with these days hover around the $1 million plus. Some are less, but a lot of them are over $1 million, $2 million.
Right.
And that's the basic, family house. It just is what it is these days.
That's right.
But if you're going to spend that kind of money and down payment, and there's a lot at stake, I think you want to, inspect the property as much as possible.
Right.
If it's a hillside, you need geological. It could be north of $2,000 for inspections.
I think one of the standard forms you guys use today spells out, I think, 35 or 38 different kinds of inspections that could take place.
Yeah. It has a list. It's just a refresher, kind of a prompt people to say, look, this is kind of everything potential.
Right.
And it includes things for wells, for rural areas, which you're not going to do. And it even has a few lines to add other inspections that may have not been listed on the form. But yeah, I go when we get an offer accepted, I send that form to every buyer and I say, look, these are the inspections I would recommend. Here's the form with all of them. Look through it.
It's a good point where you say, 30 some years and hundreds of transactions where you could say, maybe I can save the buyer some money because my instincts through my experience and learning tells me that's probably not a problem. You don't need to spend $1,500 to go get that inspected.
Right. If you're on a flat piece of property in an area that's completely flat, you're not going to do a geological inspection.
Right.
It makes no sense. Could you do it? Sure. But really, it just doesn't really make any sense to do that.
Right. Okay. So next step. Now you start looking.
You'll start looking. Now you're finding a house that you like. So then you write the offer and communicate with a listing agent right away. See what's going on. If it's a brand new listing and you go to the open house and there are 50 groups of people in the house during an open house, in the 20 minutes you're at the house, well, that house is going to have a ton of activity. Right. If it's been on the market for 3 weeks, maybe it's a little overpriced. Maybe you have some negotiating power.
Yeah. That sounds so funny to say at 3 weeks, it's an indicator of something,
Yeah.
I mean, I think you started in an era where 3 months would not be short.
Correct.
Yeah.
We in the early 90s, we had, 10,000 listings and we sold a few hundred a month. So
right.
It was silly.
Yeah. A lot of difference. Okay. So now you're out there showing, you're getting prepped. They like this house, and do you go through comps with every one of your buyers?
Yeah. We go through comps, but I also, again, in the market we're in, I tell them, look, comps are okay, but they're sort of just a very loose gauge as to what's going on.
It's a ballpark.
It's a ballpark, and
get you in the area code.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Because what are you going to do? You can't say, look, these are the comps, and yet the house sells for $100,000 over the comps.
Right.
Because other buyers want to pay more. Right. So really, your barometer is the activity, and you try to talk to the listing agent, get some kind of gauge. Some people tell you more, some people tell you less.
Right.
And you know that they're really not going to lie to you about it. They're either not going to tell you, or they're going to tell you kind of accurate numbers.
Right.
And that's just the way it is, because most of the time when I find out that number and I tell my buyer and they're saying, well, we won't go that high, we'll write less. Well, then they don't get the house.
Right.
It closes, and I go,
I remember the house that I live in now, which I've lived in for almost 20 years. But I remember when I bought it, there were 5 offers. I was one of 5 offers.
20 years ago.
Yeah. And I felt that the property was overpriced based on comps.
Right.
Right. And then you say, well, comps is an indicator, but so are 5 people who want the house.
Right.
That's a good indicator too.
Exactly. And when you have 20 of those people, that's a crazy indicator.
That's a crazy indicator, yeah. So that tells you that throw the comps out. You're in a new arena now. You got 5 people who are wanting this house, you know, and 5 people aren't going to grossly overpay. And what was funny about it was I had drawn sort of a line in the sand personally, and I only have about 30,000 transactions under my belt, you know, since I started in real estate. And so I'm here, and I sort of made up my mind to not pursue this with the multiple offers because I thought even my offer was too high. And I remember going to lunch with a real estate broker who'd been around for a long time, and he laughed at me when I told him that. He goes, "You've been around this long enough to know, and now you're acting like a buyer.
Right.
You know, you're getting so emotional. You're saying this and that." And he says, finally, "Do you like this house?" And he wasn't representing me. We were just having conversation like friends. And he says, "That's just stupid, Roger." He goes, "It's $20,000 one way or the other. Who cares? Go buy the damn house."
Right.
If your happiness is if it's what you want, go buy the house.
Right. If you can afford it and buy the house, because in 10, 20 years it won't matter. In 5 years it probably won't matter.
But I walked out feeling silly that, because he gave me the advice I would give someone as a real estate broker, but as the purchaser, you get emotional.
Right.
And you don't see things quite the same, even someone with my experience. So so that's interesting.
So we look at comps, we write the offer. I find out up front from the agent. If I can get a hold of the agent, have a conversation with them, not always the case, but when I can, I try to find out as much information of what the seller wants.
Right.
Short escrow, long escrow, other terms, rent back, not rent back. What are they looking for? Anything in particular?
And you do that so that the buyer can design you want to give them something that's important to them that may not cost your buyer anything.
Correct. So if they want a 40-day escrow and it doesn't matter to my buyer, sure, we'll give you a 40-day escrow. If they want a 25-day escrow, my lenders can close in 20, 25 days. We've done it. It's crazy. It's a sprint. It's not a marathon at that point. It is just an all-out, full-on sprint, especially for first-time buyers.
Right.
But I've closed within 3 weeks with a loan with a first-time buyer because the seller needed that, because they had a wall they were up against.
Right.
And they were going to pick an offer based on that, slightly more than price, if prices were kind of similar.
Right.
And so we said, we can do that. And I knew that my lender could do that because they've done it before. So we try to compose the offer as close to what the seller would want. If the seller wants their washer and dryer, I'm not going to write that in. It's a small thing.
Right.
If they don't want their washer and dryer, they don't want to move it. They don't have the means to move it.
Right.
Fine, we'll just take it. Absolutely, no problem. Because who cares? It's a small item to deal with later on, to either get one or to get rid of one. A fridge, a washer and dryer, a patio set, whatever. Who cares?
Right.
These are things that are very simple. And you just try to, stack your offer as much as possible towards the seller so that your buyer has
and you can't do that without some experience. You understand why people have you've seen hundreds and hundreds of times people make decisions over little things.
Yeah. It's always amazing to me, we for many things in our lives, we ask for referrals. We want people who've been around for a long time. And forget the classic example of the doctor and the lawyer, but even other things that we deal with in our lives. You want to be dealing with people who are professional and know what they're doing,
right.
and things that are way less expensive than a house or way less important in one's life than a house. Yet
right.
in real estate, we find that people are so quick to have someone represent them that just doesn't have that knowledge and background,
right.
because they may be a family member or a friend's referral or just someone they've met along the way,
right.
but seems like a nice person, so I'll have them represent me.
I'll tell you what, I can't begin to tell people, again, I'm not selling houses as a person anymore, but in some of the closing business I see, it's almost impossible to explain how much damage I've seen done in transactions by people who just are relatively new, or they don't have a commitment to go to a 4-week training program. They just want to get out there and try to make some commission.
Yeah.
And then see clients who don't put that person through some sort of vetting process because they got thousands of dollars at stake, and yet they so underestimate the real estate transaction and what goes on that they don't think this agent with no experience is going to impact them, one way or the other.
Right.
And I've seen so much damage caused by that.
Yeah. Some of my if I take my challenging transactions, the ones that I had another good agent on the other side versus the ones that I had an agent that I just could feel was just doesn't know what they're doing,
right.
or just isn't responsive, has other people return the calls or whomever, something like that.
Right.
The chances of a deal falling apart with one of those agents who isn't engaged and doesn't know what they're doing is huge.
Right.
If you have two agents that really know what they're doing, both trying to really help their client,
right.
and have a wealth of knowledge. And there are those great agents out there.
A lot of them, yeah.
Yeah, there are quite a few, but you got to find them.
Yeah.
And so
there's a lot, but it's still a small percentage of the 1.5 million realtors out there. Yeah,
absolutely.
That's true.
And so when I have that transaction and there are challenges, we get through them. We can save if everybody still wants the deal. If the buyer wants to buy, the seller wants to sell, the agents can really glue it all together and make it happen.
Or blow it up.
And if they're not, if they don't know what they're doing,
yeah.
or if even one just doesn't know what they're doing,
right,
then it just becomes very challenging. And because that agent isn't counseling their client properly to get them to still do the deal,
or they let their personal egos get in the way, or it's like I've always said. You've heard me say it probably, is that an agent should never be the most motivated person in the transaction, because they just mess things up sometimes with their own motivation or their own ego or whatever it is.
Yeah. It's part of my upbringing, and again part of the education and people that I was around in the beginning of real estate, and the commission has never been the driving force.
Right.
It's do a good job. Just do a good job, because if you do a good job, you're going to get paid. And it comes around that way.
Yeah, exactly. And you stay in the business for 30 years because most of your business is coming from clients that refer you friends or relatives, they come back to you.
Yes.
If you're a person 1 or 2, 3 years in business and you don't know that you're going to be in the business 5 years from now, what do you care about this repeat business?
Right.
Go in, get your money, get out, and go on, get your acting job, or whatever you want to do.
It's also a philosophical thing about you as a person. And to me, it's just, I just want the buyer, the seller, whomever, to be happy at the end of the deal. And that's it. And, even if they don't give me business, I want the best for them.
Right.
I just want the best for them. And because of that, I don't care. I'll get paid. That's not an issue. That's not in the front of my head. That's like nowhere in the back somewhere.
Right.
I don't do the math of how much I'm going to get paid. I don't care until the end, and they send you the paperwork on the commission. Okay, fine. But that's not the driving force. It's just properly representing your clients.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, what's your purpose for getting out of bed? If it's, hey, I want to go out and feel good about myself and what I do for others, it's a character. It's hard to see in people.
Right. It's just sort of like trying to do something good every day.
Right.
You know, it's that philosophy of life. It's if I have knowledge, this is the other part of this whole real estate thing. Now that I've been doing it for so long, I actually enjoy this way more than I did before.
Right.
It's a really fun adventure for me with each client, because to me, it's sort of, if I have knowledge and I don't give you my knowledge, to me, that's like malpractice. That's criminal. Why should I keep information buried if I know that it might help you make a decision to buy the house or not to buy the house?
Right.
If it's the wrong house, we're 10 days into the deal, and something isn't right, and you don't want to buy the house, and it's not right for you, we get out.
I got to tell you, that's a common theme amongst the agents that have been on the Ambitious Broker podcast. Is I see it all the time, and a lot of the agents that come on, like you, I've known for a while, so I can speak to your credibility or others' credibility. But the one thing that I notice about people is that, and that's why I came up with the don't be the most motivated person, because what I see is the people who let nature take its course and try to help bring buyers and sellers together, they just seem to stay around a long time. You know, the others who are more short-sighted don't seem to stick around very long.
That's true.
You know, so it's good for the agent, it's good for the client, it's just good karma.
Right.
You know, how about let's flip the switch a little bit here and look at it from a seller. In fact, before we get into that, and I do want to talk about the seller part, is this new real estate world that we live in because of some of the new rules. You know, California has a law started January 1st, 2025 that says every buyer now has to have a contract with the person who represents them. That's brand new. Never happened in the 1,000 years of real estate. It's going to be an interesting change for people. You have to sit down now with a buyer and say, choose me, as opposed to the old days where the seller would pay the commission, and now the buyer's going to have a contract with you to pay a commission to you. Now, in some cases, the seller will pay that for the buyer,
right,
and you'll get paid that way. But it's the first time in the history of real estate where you have the buyer is contracted with an agent, and the seller is contracted with an agent. So it looks very much like a legal situation where you got an attorney on one side and an attorney on the other side. And I think the opportunity for guys like you in this new situation is that more than ever before, you can really draw a line that says, I'm here to get the best ever for you. Previous to this, you've always had in the back of your brain that you do still have some fiduciary to that seller.
I legally maybe so, yes, but I never thought of it that way. I knew that, yes, the seller has committed in the old ways to pay the buyer's brokerage X amount.
Right.
But you're not going to get that X amount if you're not doing a good job for your buyer, if the deal falls apart.
Right.
So you still have to continuously focus on the fact that you have to represent your buyer before and now.
Right.
Yeah, the philosophy has changed, and we're seeing now that it's been, January of 25, it's been almost 6 months, 6 months or so since this changed.
Right.
It seems that it's finding its own place, and most sellers are paying it anyhow.
Right.
It may not be the same. It's more negotiable than it was before because it was predetermined.
Right.
It was negotiable before, but it was predetermined and inked and determined in the multiple listing service.
Right.
But now it's not.
Right.
So that's changed. I think the focus still has to remain on representing your buyer when you're representing a buyer, and representing your seller when you're representing a seller, and not. I don't really like the dual agency concept anyhow. I never have.
Right.
I rarely do both sides of the transaction.
Yeah.
It's happened to me. It happens once a year or less for me.
Right.
And I know agents that it happens a lot for them.
Right.
And I will only do it if I've sat both parties down, not together, individually,
right,
and thoroughly explained the pros and cons to a seller,
right,
and to a buyer.
Well, it's actually not legal in some states.
Yeah, it's not legal in some states. And so for me, I just feel like it's a much cleaner way to go.
Right.
If both parties thoroughly understand the pros and cons, and they still want to do it, great, we'll do it. But we've had that discussions before, and we go from there. And that's just the way that I feel is important to do that.
What advice would you give? I'm sorry, before I do, let's go back and let's finish this path of the seller side now.
Okay.
You sit down with a seller in the very beginning and walk me down that pathway.
First, it's why are you selling? What's your plan? Plan A, plan B, what's the motivation? Usually I know, but it's always good to confirm and ask and figure all that out.
Right.
But then it starts the road of, okay, so do you need to buy? Okay, it's more than just, okay, great, let's just sell your house. Well, what does that mean? Where are you going? Because selling eventually means you're not going to own the property. If you live in it, you need to be somewhere else. What's the plan for that? Do we need to go buy before we sell? Do we need to sell with a contingency of then finding a place you're going to go to, a home of choice?
Right.
What is that whole picture like? We got to focus in on that. Mm-hmm. Once we dial that in, we know, okay, this is what we're doing. Now we got to get the house ready to sell. Right. What does that mean? Does that mean that your house is cluttered and needs to be decluttered? Does that mean that you live in a house that you just keep immaculate all the time? You walk in and it just looks like a model, because some people do really live like that.
Yeah.
And some people don't. And there's everywhere in between. I've had people who've had to have had truckloads of stuff removed from the house first.
Right.
Dumpsters and dumpsters before we could get in there and do anything. And I've had the show-ready model homes that are just ready to go.
Right.
So you dial that in and you talk about
I've seen people spend $15,000, $20,000 just to empty their house and stage it to look like the model home.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then you start talking about that philosophy. And yes, you can always sell the property as is. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But then you have to speak with the seller and understand, if you don't do anything, you may yield this much.
Right.
If you do these things, you probably will get this much. What would you like to do? If they don't have the bandwidth to do it and it has to be sold as is, then sometimes that's just the way it goes.
Right.
If they can and they want to, then they'll net maybe a little bit more.
Right.
So we get the house ready, and that's either a few day process or it could be a few month process it's taken on some as well.
Right. Well, it's the old saying about, you want to get the most money in the shortest amount of time with the fewest amount of problems. The two stories that you probably want to get the most amount of money, fewest amount of problems, and a timing that works for you.
Yes, that's really the bottom line.
Yeah.
And we dial that in as best we can. And then once we know our plan of what we're doing or not doing, we execute that plan. And then once all said and done, the last things we do are the photos, the staging, getting it up and ready. And then we go on the market.
Right. Then
the fun begins.
Yeah, then the marketing and
marketing. So, and look, the philosophy in real estate, I've realized a few years back, has completely flip-flopped. Before the age of computers and the internet as we know it today, not the beginnings of it, but the real apps and internet and smartphones. So going back to about 2010, 8, 10, whatever, somewhere in there. Before that time, a job of a real estate professional, an agent, was to market a property so you can find buyers, and for a buyer's agents to find properties for your buyers, and connect the listings and the buyers. There was a lot of legwork that had to be done, a lot of talking to other agents, a lot of communication, pitching your property, going to meetings, going to all these things, advertising, mass amounts of print advertising at the time, because you had to get the word out. There was no way to get the word out about a property other than print, advertising, open houses, talking to people about it.
Yeah.
And for a buyer's agent, you had to go look at houses. You had to physically go and see tons of homes because there were no photos. There was a description. But you didn't know what color the carpeting was, if it was new or old. You didn't know if it was a purple house or a green house or a white house.
Right.
You knew nothing. And so you had to do a lot of legwork.
Right.
The paperwork back then was minimal. At the end of a deal, a file was 30 pages, all
Right.
in, inspections, everything.
Yeah.
Now the role has flipped.
The original contract's more than 30 pages now.
Yeah. Now the role has flipped.
Yeah.
The paperwork, we don't print the files really anymore, but if we were to, it's 3, 4, it could be 500 pages in a file.
Right.
Finding properties and marketing properties has changed dramatically.
Yeah. That's another thing too. I mean, in fairness, there's very few buyers or sellers who read every piece of word on those contracts anymore.
No,
they're just too long to be practical. So they hope that you did.
Right. Even my most pedantic, perfectionist type buyers don't. I've had attorneys who tell me I'm not reading anything. I don't care. It's all boilerplate. Tell me what's important and off and running. It's fine, and I trust you. So there's that. But the role has really flipped. So now you need to know the paperwork because there's so much at risk. You're signing everything, and you're kind of. It's sort of like when you go on a website and there's this, forever scrolling, but you have to agree to get to the next page. Nobody reads it. You just agree.
Right.
So, because in order to get to the next thing, you got to agree to it.
Right.
You don't know what you've agreed to.
Right.
And it's become sort of this way with real estate. The paperwork is daunting. It's pages and pages and pages.
Right.
And it's all to say, look, we told you, and I told you, and you told me, and da-da-da-da-da.
Cover your back end stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
So fine, but the devil's in the details, and you got to know what you're signing.
Right.
And that's where a good agent comes in and says, look, I had to point this out to you because I know that it's important. We've talked about this, and you told me that this is important to you. And here, on this form, on this page, I want you to see that there's maybe something that may not jive with what you wanted.
Right.
And so, look, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Now we've talked about it. Is it a problem? Do you want to buy the house? Do you not want to buy the house? And that's sort of what happens. But marketing, from a seller point of view, which is what went off on a tangent, but marketing from a seller point of view, honestly, has become very minimal these days.
Yeah.
It's always been price, but now it's even more critical that it's price. You get, what's the old saying? You get one chance to make a good first. What's the saying?
Yeah, one chance to make a first impression. Yeah,
make a good first impression, and it's true because you bring out a property that in your heart should sell for whatever 1.8, and you bring it at 2.1.
Right.
It's a kiss of death. You're done.
Yep.
You're 60 days on the market longer.
Yep.
Now you're reducing, and there have been studies done and articles written that if you don't price a property accurately to begin with, and you end up in the reduction game, the seller will most likely end up with less
money. And there's no doubt. I mean, in my mind, that's clearly established.
But you and I understand that.
Yeah.
The consumer doesn't all the time.
That's true. In fact, there's a lot of people who run with the philosophy now that they, in this particular type of market where it's huge seller's market and there's going to be a lot of people out there, they want to get into these competitive situations. They feel that the most money that the seller's going to get is out of a bidding more, and they intentionally lower the price. They actually list it below what they think is a fair price to generate that kind of interest. It's an interesting marketing strategy.
And it works. I have to say, this takes me back to the auction days of the 90s when we had all these short sales, all these bank-owned properties, and there was a company called Kennedy Wilson, and they did hundreds or 1,000 homes in an afternoon. They had a time period before you go to see the house, and I went to auctions with my clients, and we had a set price in mind.
Right.
And we saw how prices were way different back then, $250, $300 for a house.
Right.
But a house that we went to, analyzed it, looked at the inspections, did the comps, and thought, okay, it's a $300,000 house.
Right.
Or so.
Right.
We're seeing auctions, we're seeing people bidding way north of $3. We're talking into the 350s or higher.
Right.
And yes, in retrospect, of course, it doesn't matter. 30 years later, it's worth $3 million, whatever.
Right.
But at the time, that wasn't a smart deal.
Right.
Yet, because of the auction mentality and the bidding thing, that's what happens. Now, if I'm representing the seller, that's what I want from my seller. That's why I don't like to do both sides.
Right.
Because I need to get that seller the most money. And if I can position it and price it right, make it look really nice, help them position it price-wise to where we can generate 10, 20, 30 offers. 30 is a lot. So it's a lot of work for me.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's fine.
Yeah.
Because 80%, 90%, out of 30 offers, you're going to have 5, 7 viable ones. Right. Everybody else is just going to throw away.
That's right.
So you're really dealing with 3 to 5, 6 offers
Serious,
or so.
yeah.
Serious. You take those, you analyze those, then you start to communicate with those agents and see who's going to be the best one. Maybe someone will even come up more.
But you list it too high, and the next thing you know, there's no competition. In fact, everyone just acknowledges you're too high, and you don't.
Yep.
Yeah, you get some showings, and
the silence is deafening.
Then you start beg rather than have control.
Yes,
yeah.
And that's the thing. You want to be in the position of control. And we've been in this crazy seller's market for over a decade now.
Yep.
And frankly, I don't know if and when that'll change. Something very drastic. Even the change from 2 and 3% interest rates to 7 and 8 that we've flipped through, or 6 or whatever we're going to end up at.
Right.
We thought was going to be maybe the kiss of death of this market, and yet it wasn't. It was a period of about 6 to 9 months of this really shock and adjustment. And after that, it just seems like these buyers realize 3% is gone. There's a saying, marry the house, date the rate.
Right.
Get that house. If you can afford the house, get the house.
Right.
If and when rates go to 6 or 5, sure, refinance. If it makes a difference, refinance.
Right.
But to see a market that's going to collapse 20, 30% in value and become a buyer's market rather than a seller's market, everything is cyclical. Nothing, you can't ever say it won't happen.
Well, the last decade, all the cycles are out of whack.
Yes.
The classic ones. And like we said, if you go back at the last decade, 80% of people in real estate have never seen the cycle. They're not even aware of what
Correct.
It means. The
Yeah.
different
Most people in real estate today don't even know what a short sale is.
Right.
So, there's that. Or how, and even if they know the term, they have no idea how to negotiate one and deal with one.
AITs, wraparounds, all that
geez,
stuff. Yeah.
yes.
Never going to happen. Yeah. Okay, talk to me about, we've kind of talked about, but client service in general. I know that you're a very detailed guy. That's the devil's in the details is sort of a motto of yours, I think.
Yes, that's for sure.
Yeah.
As far as client services, I mean, I've amassed these checklists now.
Right.
And I keep changing them, but I don't know. I'd have to look. Maybe 100 or so items on each checklist for a buyer and a seller. And you just go, and not everything applies to everyone, but a lot of it does.
Right.
And a lot of it is just, I know it's all routine, but you don't want to forget anything. And you just go down the checklist and with a seller, something simple as changing the air conditioning filter, changing the batteries or getting new smoke detectors before the inspections, before you go on the market, so that the inspector doesn't have as many things to pick at.
Right.
To not add to the burden. Little handy things are on my checklist. For a buyer, it's the same thing. What's on the checklist?
Right.
Did we check this? Did we inspect that? It just goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
And in fact,
checklist is a great term. I'm a pilot, and
yes,
we live off checklists.
You have to.
I mean,
I pull
a plane out of the hangar, I got a checklist at every point on the plane that you look at, and it's so easy to have. I've done this for 40 years. At some point in time, you go, this is in my brain,
right?
And usually it is, but you do miss stuff occasionally.
And do you ever take off without going through the checklist?
No,
ever.
No, but there are times when I catch myself wanting to, go fast forward through it, or I know I've done it because 99% of the time I can get it all mentally. I can sit here and in my mind write off the checklist, but I physically bring it out, and I go through every one. It's the same thing I would have done mentally, but there's just this important habit for detail.
And the reason, and that's a great point.
Flying one detail can kill you. buying houses, a detail can cost you a lot of money.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
When you're flying, it's your life, it's other people's lives, crash and burn. You don't want that.
Yeah.
So you're going to do everything within your power to minimize that to the absolute zero as you can.
Exactly.
Okay? When you buy a house, when you sell a house, same thing. Why not go through the whole list? Now, I actually think, and I know, that it probably takes me longer to go through a transaction. It takes me longer to do things because I want to make sure. I've tried to, just hurry up, do it faster. And then I tend to make more mistakes that way.
Right.
And so it is what it is. I want great transactions with my clients so they're happy, they're satisfied. And takes a little longer. But that, and in fact, I even have things I do for my clients after the close of escrow.
Right.
So they're...
Well, one of the things about your transactions that is you're a very successful broker at what you do. There are people who do a lot more sales, and they brag about the number of sales they do.
Yes.
And a lot of times when they start doing high volume, they have to start turning things over to people. And I know that's been a real hard point of resistance for you. You said, no, I can hire people to do these details, but those details is what you think is your greatest value.
Yeah.
You're not going to turn over to a team.
No. Team concept, no. I do have the typical transaction coordinator that just makes sure, because the paperwork is so daunting.
Right.
And I don't want to miss anything. So they go through, they make sure everything is signed by everybody properly.
Got their own checklist?
Got their own, yes. The TC has definitely their own checklist that we've put together, actually.
Right.
And it's just something that has to be done.
Right.
Just to make sure we're all on point and you know, buyers and sellers get what they need to get.
Yeah, what they need to get. Well, I'll tell you, I think that your group is one of the few groups out there, or few companies that actually survey all the sales that are made and clients. And you've got extraordinary testimonial ranking and survey ranking and so forth. It's just like this is working for you.
Yeah.
It proves it's working because of this.
Yeah, it's actually become a lot of fun to close an escrow and then send out that survey.
Right.
And I just tell people, you're going to get a survey. Frankly, just do it as honestly.
Just be honest.
Be honest. I don't care what you say, don't say, do say, whatever you want to do. And it's just, that's rewarding. That's very.
And you should be very proud of it.
I am. It's great.
Well, Shawn, thank you for being with me today. You are an ambitious broker, and I'm proud to know you. Glad that you're in my world.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
You bet. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Take care.